All right. So, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to Before the Valley. Hello, Nikolai. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Peter? How do you feel to be back at Before the Valley?
I feel good. Did you see the comments on the last YouTube video?
Yeah,
like,
one of them was like, "Where is Peter?" But I like the quote from Churchill.
Yeah, yeah. That was my dad, by the way, so it doesn't count.
I didn't want to expose you, but still.
I exposed myself. Yes.
Yeah. So you're back today, and we all feel good, and I feel that it's time to have a very good podcast.
Yeah, I think we rewatched the last podcast and we thought of ways to improve it. So let's see how we implement all of these now.
Yes.
So our first topic today is gonna be on graduation, because a lot of you are graduating. We're in the period where a lot of you are finishing university and you don't know what to do probably, or some of you know what to do, but you have several options. So you're trying to figure out what option to go for. And we are in a similar situation, at least you, Nikolai. I was in a similar situation last year. And we thought it might be quite useful for us to go through that topic and discuss a bit about how to choose what to do afterwards and set your direction and basically what to go for, or at least how we see it. So first I wanted to present a short story of Mark Cuban, the owner of the Dallas Mavericks. I'm sure a lot of you know him from Shark Tank, the show Shark Tank. So I just want to shortly present what his story is and how did he choose his direction after he graduated. So what Mark Cuban did is, his way of thinking was, okay, I've been paying for such a long time to learn stuff, and now I can get paid by other people to learn myself. So instead of, paying for a master's or paying for other tuition, he was thinking from the standpoint of a wannabe entrepreneur who wanted to learn as much as he can and build his own company. So long story short, he went to Dallas, slept at an apartment with 6 other people. He was sleeping on the floor, sleeping on the couch.
The typical story.
Yeah, exactly. Typical entrepreneur story. He started working at a club, and during the day he was looking for jobs. So he finally found something that was of interest of him in a sector where he actually wanted to learn. That was software. He wanted to sell software. So he went to the interview. And he had the interview. He wasn't prepared at all. He didn't know anything about software. What he was saying is, what I was a good salesman. That's it. I was a good salesman. I knew how to sell stuff. Naturally, I can establish good relationships with people. So what he did is, the guy asked him, okay, like, if someone comes to the shop and they ask you something and you don't know nothing about this thing, what are you gonna do? And because his way of thinking was, I want to learn as much as I can now that I graduated. I want to learn as much as I can about software, as much as I can about business. So he answered the question in a very genuine manner. So what he said is, I'm gonna open the manual and learn what I need to learn. I'm gonna read it out if I have to the client. So the guy who was interviewing him liked the answer, and that's why they took him on the job. So once he started to work at that place, what he's saying is every night he would read manuals and stuff just to learn as much as he can. And that gave him the edge, is what he's saying. That gave him the edge over all the other entrepreneurs, because when he was going to meetings and stuff afterwards, when he established his own business, he was saying, I was telling these people, okay, this software has this problem, this software has this problem. And I thought they would know about these problems because they read about them somewhere. Yeah. But it turns out no one knew about them. So this gave him an edge over others. And people respected him for that and liked to work with him. So that's the story in a nutshell. And it kind of leads us into this direction of choosing something that you can learn from after you graduate. So what do you think about it?
Well, that, like, to be honest, that's a very interesting story. First of all, because you can see how, first of all, what made the impression of interesting thing was he said, I was paying to learn. Now I can get paid to learn. That's point one, which makes a lot of sense. We are, especially me right now, I'm in a process still in university, final year, but I'm paying to be learning stuff on a daily basis. And when I graduate, this changed dramatically, like the thing flips. So that's point one. Point two is that it's interesting for me from this story is that he was not prepared for this job, but what he said is that I'll do my utmost to become the best at it because I'm gonna learn everything that I need to in order to excel, which is something that gave him the edge, as he said, afterwards. So this process of after graduation, he was focused on learning, and without even expecting, he became much better than the rest when it comes to software, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Which made him some extent successful entrepreneur because he had some knowledge and some expertise in an area which he developed in while being, I don't know, apprentice, like, or being a junior employee, which is nothing special, right? But this led to him becoming the very best at what he's doing.
Yeah, exactly. And a funny thing is he was saying, I continue to read 3 hours a day even now that I'm so successful, and my wife hates me for it, but I need to do this to get that edge over everyone else.
Yeah.
So I guess it's a long-term thing, like self-development and learning, and I think it gives you a perspective once you're graduating as well.
Do you know something interesting related to this is that when I was reading some stuff about the topic today on Ray Dalio's Instagram, I don't know how many of you know him. We've discussed him many times. Even when he came here, he's...
Can you tell us briefly about him?
Yeah, he founded, and he's the founder basically of the biggest hedge fund in the world currently, especially in the US, and he's a very, very good entrepreneur, but also a business person who wrote a book called Principles, where he basically wrote all the principles that led to him becoming the very best. And so basically what he has on his Instagram page is some quotes from the book or some personal thoughts that he wants to share with people. And currently he's been sharing stuff about graduation. And one of them was that you're going to enter the period where you know almost nothing about stuff. It's completely different than what you knew before. And you have to acknowledge this, and you have to embrace this new reality which you're going to be exposed to. Therefore, you have to be very open-minded and very curious to be learning new stuff, because basically you know nothing about what you're going to do and what's up front of you. This is what he said. And I think that probably, if this is a principle which he implemented, it's similar to Mark Cuban's one. He was learning constantly, being open-minded, which led to him becoming, an outlier in his sector.
Yeah, exactly. And an interesting thing touching on Ray Dalio is that he's an investor. Like, the guy is mainly an investor. I don't think he started as a classic entrepreneur creating a product or something. So that's very interesting to hear that someone with a career, he's still an entrepreneur, obviously, he has a hedge fund, but someone who started with a career, very successful in that career, then created his hedge fund, he's still recommending the same thing. So I guess even if you don't want to go straight for the entrepreneurial way, but are also considering a career in a specific sector, it's still quite useful to look at what you have to choose from a learning standpoint.
Yeah. Was it something that you did when you mentioned in the first podcast what you're currently doing, digital marketing? Was your career choice based on learning?
Yes, definitely. Even I guess that's one of the main reasons for us choosing this topic, because when we were discussing what to talk about, if you remember, I was telling you how closely I associate with Mark Cuban on this one point.
Yeah.
So yeah, my main motivation for starting a career in digital marketing was to learn more about digital marketing and then apply it in my entrepreneurial endeavors. So it's the same for me, and that's why Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so like I remember that when last summer we were discussing with you, like having like a conversation about what job should I choose. So like we were having this talk, and you had several options. Was the only reason for you to choose digital marketing because you wanted to become good at digital marketing, or there were other reasons as well?
No, that wasn't the only reason. The other reason was, okay, I'm a very analytical person. I enjoy maths, econometrics, stuff like that, data. So the first thing I thought is I'm gonna go for data science. Like I'm gonna be a data scientist. I'm gonna be an analyst in some company. But then I thought, okay, what do I need? What do I lack? And what do I need to reach my goals, which were to create a business? And I thought I'm not very good with people. I'm not very good with communicating what I think, my ideas. So it might be better to go for a job that would allow me to interact more with people, articulate my ideas. And also marketing is all about presenting your ideas in a specific way. So that's also a useful thing. So that's why I went for something in the middle. I went for sales jobs as well, and business development jobs, which are just people, just communicating with people. But then I went for the middle option where I can combine data analysis with communication with people and presenting ideas in a specific way. So what I'm interested is, what about you? Like, what are you planning to do now? What's your view of this?
I'm gonna share this just one thing. I was checking my notes because you said that you wanted to see what's gonna put you in the best position in the future, and this is something from a talk which I recently listened to from the founder of Weebly. He said, optimize for learning. Therefore, you have to think, what should I do now so that I can be in a better position to understand what I need to do in the next 5-10 years. So this is to some extent what you did, right?
Exactly. Yes. I think he was talking about businesses, but you can apply it to yourself as well.
Yeah, it's like a general principle as well. Well, in my case, like to some extent, I know what I want to do in the long term. That's either having my own business or being part of a venture capital firm, which I also mentioned in the first podcast. But like venture capital is not something that you can jump in straight away after graduation. You have to have the expertise or the network. So therefore, my approach is, okay, first of all, do I really want to do venture capital now? How do I learn this or understand this? Is by networking, like heavy networking with people who are part of the industry. On the other hand, reading online blogs, different newsletters. I just went online and signed up for 20 newsletters about venture capital, and some of them are pretty good. Like they send you short updates or some tips and advice, and it gives you a better idea of what's going on in the industry. So that's point one. Do I really want to be venture capitalist at some point in the future? And point two is, if that's the case, what do I need to do today to reach that point in the future? Which is to some extent optimization for learning, but on the other hand is you need to go through some steps in order to reach that point or your end goal, and analyze those options or what I have to do now and focus on it. Just do it, and this will eventually hopefully lead to my end goal.
Yeah, I have a question for you because it's quite interesting. I know what your ambitions are. I know you want to get into venture capital, but you're also thinking about startups and entrepreneurship. And I see these two goals as very similar. Like you can combine your path, so to speak. Like the things you'll be learning for startups and for venture capital are quite similar. So for starting a startup and investing in startups, which is the venture capital way. So would you say batching your goals in that way is useful?
It's useful to some extent. You said that they're similar. Yes, they are, because in order to be a good investor in startups, you have to understand startups, how they operate in a specific industry, which is what venture capitalists look for. So therefore, what I'm learning now for startups and small businesses and how to start them, run them, is very useful. But on the other hand, is something which you said that these two goals like overlap sometimes. That's true. And in many cases, entrepreneurs go to become venture capitalists or the other way around. Yeah. So it's not something like, it's very hard probably to do both at the same time, but you can jump from one to the other because in both you develop skills that can help you and the alternative option, right? That's
Yeah, precisely.
that's how I see it. But yeah, like that's how I see it now. I'm not quite sure how true this is. I did some research looking for what people are doing that go into venture capital, and as I told you, there around 20 or 30% of them were business people, which means having their own businesses or being part of smaller firms initially, which gave them again that edge because they were learning how to do it. They were learning how to understand whether a startup is good, which is what Mark Cuban did, and eventually they succeeded in becoming venture capitalists. Yeah,
and I'm thinking now.
Like,
go ahead.
No, like I was gonna give you something very interesting, which I'm not quite sure if you know about it, but if your point's related to what I was saying, you can go for it.
No, please share it. It's on a different note.
That's something related to Stoicism. You shared a video yesterday about it. It's Ryan Holiday, who's a very famous author when it comes to Stoicism, and I actually realized that I read a book about Stoicism when I was still in secondary school. Like, I didn't understand anything about Stoicism back then, and I was just reading the book. So what he said is that you have to implement the canvas strategy. And what this means is that you have to put down your ego, especially when you're graduating, when you're still junior, fresh, without much knowledge. And instead of saying, no, I want to be the very best and I have to go there straight away, they have to respect me, they have to, appreciate me for what I'm doing, you have to put down your ego and even sometimes do stuff for other people just to make them do better. Which does not mean to be, I found a very good phrase, to be curry favor with somebody else, which means to be flattering them in order to gain some advantage in a later stage, like your boss especially. But rather,
basically.
Yeah, I didn't want to say this phrase, but yeah, it's basically, what can I do for my boss, which is going to help me learn, which is what he needs at the same time, and is gonna also help him become better. And this is a strategy which people like Leonardo da Vinci, Ben Franklin, and Michelangelo have implemented. Initially, they didn't care that much about whether people are gonna give them the credit for what they do or if they're gonna respect them, but rather they focused on the learning curve. And what the canvas strategy, like where the canvas comes from, you have to take canvases. Wait, I have it here. Find canvases for other people to paint on. Basically, you paint on other people's canvases, not on yours. And it's much more rewarding to paint on your canvas, but initially you can F up pretty heavily because you don't know anything. And painting on other people's canvases can also help them and can help you like pretty heavily.
This is so interesting because it was yesterday when I was watching about like releasing your ego, and this is I see the relevance.
One of his books is called Ego is the Enemy, which is where I think this strategy comes from. But yeah, it's pretty interesting, and knowing that very famous people did it, like Ben Franklin, he was writing some letters that he was putting in somewhere without even putting his name. So people were getting exposed to these letters, they were reading them, and they were saying, oh, what a prodigy, who wrote these letters? His brother used them to put him on some, it's not a website, I don't know what was it, but like on a public thing, which many people were seeing. So basically he was benefiting from these letters, but nobody knew it was Ben Franklin. But what Ben Franklin happened to do is that he learned what the public opinion is, he learned how people react to what he's saying, which led to him becoming very good at speaking to people and knowing how to articulate and like knowing what to say and when through these letters, which nobody knew that they were coming from him.
Yeah, that's Marcus Aurelius and Seneca all over again, because what they're saying is what the ego does basically is stop you from learning, because you cannot learn what you think you already know. So if you're confident about something, overconfident, without the basis for it, and you think you know it, there's no way to learn it. So I can see how releasing the ego is related to learning in that way. It's very interesting that these people have also applied this in their lives, and obviously they became very successful in that way. Yeah.
This is something that we discussed with Casper, and many times I've mentioned it to you that it's strange how Casper is a friend of ours. For those of you that don't know, but how like all of this wisdom is something people were discussing so many years ago, and still nowadays we apply it and we're learning from it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's different philosophies. You cannot say that it should be one philosophy that should apply to everybody and every single person in this world, which is probably why we haven't evolved in this sense. But it's still something that's applicable, and it was applicable thousands of years ago. It's interesting.
Yeah, and that's what I was telling Casper. The ancient Greeks, not just Greeks but philosophers, because Marcus Aurelius and Seneca, there, the Stoicism is not Greeks mainly, but what they did is apply their philosophy. They were actually living their philosophy, and it's about testing a lot of your assumptions and just seeing what's the human nature, and in that way seeing what's successful and not. And yeah, it's amazing how this sustains over time.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's applicable now. Yeah.
And
okay.
Yeah, to this, so we can slightly move on to the next topic, which is also an interesting one. But we're discussing learning and how you need to optimize for learning after graduating. But there is one element in this equation which we haven't discussed, which is you need to be part of a good team. You need to have somebody to learn from, which is also the canvas strategy. You cannot pay the canvases of other people that are not doing well. You're not going to learn almost anything. And how important do you think this factor is in this whole equation when it comes to teams and culture especially as well?
I think it's crucial. You mentioned culture. I think people build, well, obviously people build culture, so it all comes down to what people you work with and what team you've created. Something interesting is Dale Carnegie, in his book How to Win Friends and Influence People, he was referring to a study in the early 20th century, so things might have changed, and all the successful companies were saying that managers of these companies were saying that they think their success is mainly due to the relationships in these companies and not that much to, let's say, technology. So that it was something like 80%, I can't remember, maybe it was 90% of a company's success comes from good management and good teams and good relationships, and good people as well. So it's crucial, in my opinion. That's the first thing. The second thing is the quickest way to learn is by asking, because you can ask specific questions rather than search for information in different sources. So that's why I think it's
like reading a book that the author went through a lot of research, a lot of learning, especially Dale Carnegie. He didn't write the book just straight away, like thinking about it. He knew what he's talking about. So you kind of save that time, which it took him to learn this.
Exactly, and you can, asking the specific question, you can pick exactly what you want to know from his mind, so to speak. So being around people who are experts in a specific sector, let's say, or want to learn or have a lot of knowledge about a specific area, it can be very useful for you to kind of direct your way to entrepreneurship, I think. So, and for a company, even the co-founder of Robinhood, Vladimir Tenev. Yeah, Vladimir Tenev. He was saying, the Bulgarian lad, he was saying that we try to hire people who are experts in their fields, who know more about specific things than us, and then we listen to them very carefully, and we base our decisions on their expertise. So this just another example, just shows to prove how important teams are. What are your thoughts on this? And would you agree that teams are probably the most important factor in a company? Because I would say so.
You have two factors, especially when you're starting a company. One of them is the idea. The other one is the team. you can have a bad idea and a good team. It might work because this good team is gonna know what to change in this idea. But if you have a good idea and a bad team, this is gonna fail. And
can I interrupt you for a short second?
Yeah, sure, go for it.
This just like brings me back to something Jordan Peterson said, which is almost all ideas are wrong. So the chances that you have a bad idea are much higher than having a good idea. So that's why you need a good team to develop this idea and turn it into something that's actually useful for people.
Yeah, you can see it makes sense. Once again, we find relation between different theories, different people speaking about them, but there is like a proper connection between them. So I do agree that teams are crucial. When it comes to what I asked you before of learning and like getting exposed to the knowledge of other people, I also agree that's a crucial aspect. And something that I've learned through other people or like what I've read is that when you communicate with people, you have to be very transparent. You have to be very truthful of what you're saying so that you can build proper relationships. And these relationships, while you learn from these people, are going to serve you in the long term as well. And as you can see, like learning and knowing from people, it's not in the sense of a team, but networking, which I told you previously, in order to learn what venture capitalists do and whether I want to do it or not, I did it by asking people who are experienced in it, who already were part of the industry, which otherwise I would have to spend, I don't know, like years in trying to get there and then realizing, oh, no, okay, this is not what I want, or this is what I want as well.
Yeah, exactly.
But
can I ask you?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you about your experience with teams rather than just relationships, and I guess our team in our business, and what has been your approach to building a good team after you found out how important having a good team is? Yeah,
so when it comes to PP Network, our approach was rather spontaneous. I mean, we were growing as a company, realizing that we need to hire more people. And initially we were doing the stuff ourselves. And this is something that I listened in a podcast recently. They said, don't hire too soon unless you really, really need to do it. Like initially when starting a company, you need to do most of the stuff yourself because you're learning from that. Because you're capable actually of doing more, and like hiring another person is very, very important step in a company. Airbnb, they took 5 months to hire their first employee because they built like they had a list of the culture aspects of what they want, what they look for. So they realized how important it is to have this first employee, which later on led to him contributing a lot to the company because they knew that they need to find the best one. In our case, this was, as I told you, more spontaneous, but by luck or no, it worked to the extent that we wanted to. We found people that Daniel, like he wanted to leave us. He was a member, he was a client, he wanted to leave, and then I said, no, Peter, we shouldn't lose this guy. What would you say about him working with us? And you agreed on this idea, and we hired him to say this way, and he resulted to be a very good guy now. Like what he's doing, he's learning a lot, he has improved a lot. But this was our approach initially. Sorry to interrupt you again. I would say there were some characteristics that we saw in him, which led us to offer him the job because we don't want to lose him as a client. Imagine like how much we wanted to keep him. So. Yeah, I would say that, however, we were very, very inexperienced when it came to all of the decisions. We were hiring freelancers. We were getting some random people like Marcus, our web developer, the first one. Why we hired him is because he did like a prototype of the website, and we were like, oh, this is pretty cool. We're going to hire you. It doesn't make a lot of sense now. We didn't know what kind of person he is. We just saw his qualities and stuff. Which is interesting, and now we've learned a lot. The effective executive, this is what the book is speaking about as well. you need to make sure that people that are part of your team, you can communicate well with them, but also they can contribute. So it's not only the contribution, it's also that you need to feel good within such teams. So that's one point. We were inexperienced. I don't know, we can add also stuff that because you went through the same process to some extent from a different perspective.
Yeah. I would say I agree with almost everything you said. However, once we realized how important teams are and how important having people that want to develop, that have a lot of knowledge in the needed area in your team, we started offering different development methods to our team. So, for example, now one of their tasks is to read a specific book, exactly, and then we think that getting the knowledge from this book can be applied on our business afterwards. So we changed our approach to them. I would say we focus a lot on team development now, having good systems of communication and people sharing ideas all the time, people learning through books. I'm sending them courses that I do and stuff just to develop these people.
Would you say that after this journey with People Network, you would change anything to your approach in your future endeavors when it comes to projects and ventures?
Do you mean in terms of team building or?
Yeah, especially in team building.
Well, I wouldn't be that spontaneous because we were lucky now, and we put in a lot of effort into, I guess, molding the team. But I think this can be done a lot more efficient in the future if you put in more effort in instead of being that spontaneous and just like going for someone who impressed you in some way. So I would say yes, definitely. I would do a lot more research. That's one thing. I think the Airbnb way of deciding all the culture in advance and then focusing on finding people that are good for that culture is also quite good. And I would put in some like I guess development methods from the very beginning so that they can be in touch with what we already know, if that makes sense.
So you would be more critical when it comes to who you hire, and you're gonna filter out with more filters all these people that might not fit your culture and your company.
Yeah, and I would try to listen to more people initially because we went for our first hiring straight away, pretty much.
Yeah, and an interesting way to see this is that co-founders are also a team. They're like we're a team of two guys, but that's a completely different animal, to say it this way. So I was once again watching this Y Combinator video podcast that they said that the amount of time they invested in companies which had co-founders that didn't know each other, all of them failed. Like 100% of them. 100% of them failed.
No way.
On the other hand, being a solo co-founder is it's neither good because they said that out of all the companies in their last few batches, they invested only in one company with a solo co-founder. So they were looking for very good relationship between the co-founders. Do you think that it worked between us, and why did it work? Like, how did we find each other? Do you think that's a crucial thing to know yourself? Because to know each other, I mean, because we knew each other, not to that extent. We knew each other from football and going out with friends, but not from a business perspective. We knew that we're in like guys that are committed to stuff. So what would you say about this in terms of what happened, why it happened, how crucial it is?
You know, I think I'm very good. Well, that's gonna sound bad, but I'm very good at spotting potential in people intuitively. So when we were back in we come from a relatively small town. So when you look around and you're looking for people to work with, I guess you were the one standing out. That's why I started talking to you about Instagram, social media, how to develop stuff. The topics that we were discussing were different from what I would talk about with my friends. So that's why we started working on this. And then while you're working, your hypothesis, so to speak, that you have potential and that we can work together gets justified time and time again.
Yeah.
So we work on something, we share information, I see progress, and I'm just like, okay, maybe we can build something bigger. So I would say it's a process, but initially you need to like spot the potential. And we had a good relationship even before that. We weren't that close, but we had a good relationship. So I was willing to take the risk and work with you and put time in communicating everything I do with you. So that's what I would say. What about you? What would you say?
I don't know. It was once again very spontaneous. Like
yeah, it was definitely.
It all happened without us putting too much thought on it. I mean, you shared with me about Instagram. We were part of this for some time. We were not communicating that often. Then we said, okay, let's build something. So we built our first company, our first business. And since then, something that I've been telling to my friends, we've been communicating every single day for the last 2 or 3 years. Like every single day, which is crazy. And yeah, we've had our problems and stuff, but the main thing
this sounds
is
like a marriage now. Like we have our problems. how to keep a successful marriage. This
that's communicate on a daily basis. That's the advice.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would share as well your view that I saw potential in you. That I was like, okay, I know this guy. Out of my friends, he's probably the one that I would try to work with to the highest extent. I don't know how to say it. That should explain this, but yeah, this is how I decided. Okay, let's do it. Let's try. I didn't do it with any other friends of mine because that's the real reason. We knew each other. We knew our potential to some extent, and based on that, the importance of people and like how important it is to hire very good people or to find very good co-founders. Which is what we said, like 100% of them failed in Y Combinator, which is, I don't know, crazy data. But do you know why Airbnb spent 5 months? Like, what's the underlying reason behind this to hire the first employee? It's that they knew how big the impact of this person is going to be when the company is small. When you're a very big company, hiring a bad employee, it's not that detrimental. Like, the impact of this employee is not going to be that bad. But in a small startup, small company, it can be hiring a bad person could mean the end of this startup.
Yeah, it's a bigger risk. If you're 2 people and you're hiring a third person, he becomes 1/3 of the company, basically. So.
Exactly. And like mediocre people would lead to mediocre companies, which is you have to think about it in this way, and especially in our future projects, especially with Homo, and. To this, like how I think we can close this topic is from Steven Schwarzman. He's once again going to finance because I'm interested in finance. He is the co-founder of one of the biggest private equity houses, which is once again a company that invests in other businesses with the purpose to sell them. But compared to venture capital, private equities invest in bigger companies. Long story short. But he said that what made Blackstone the best is that they were focused since day one to hire people that are 10 out of 10.
Right.
That's it. That's it. Like 9 out of 10, all right, it can work. 8 out of 10, we have some questions about it. And below that, like this candidate was out. And something interesting, which he said that below 40, what defines you is before 40, you're not defined, but you 100% sure, like 100% by what you've done because you can change. So when you look for such people, yes, they can be 8 out of 10, but you can change them, you can improve them. And our experience with PPN is a great example of this. Initially, when we started working with Daniel, he was not the type of person that he is today. He has improved a lot. But after 40, this changes, and like 40 years, I mean, and it was interesting for me that after 40 you shouldn't hire people that you don't like because you cannot change them. Which when you grow as a company, when you start looking for more experienced people and experts in the area which you want to work for you should be even more critical when it comes to hiring these people, because what they are is what they are. You cannot change them.
Yeah, and these are usually top level execs over 40. If you're a big company, especially. So it's, I can see you having more filters. Do you want to finish off with your quote?
With my quote, all right.
Or do you want me to? Because you're the one who found the quote. I can read it because I'm the better. Apparently, I'm the expert in reading quotes, according to Nikolai.
What I said to Peter is like, all right, this is the quote, but can you read it, please? Because every time I read something, I'm not as emotional in doing it, which is important in order to convey the idea properly. And you're the expert.
You're putting pressure on me now. You're putting pressure on me.
Come on, let's see if you can live up to the expectations of people. And if the quote is good because you saw that your dad liked the Churchill one, let's see if this one is gonna be good enough.
Okay. So obviously we spoke about choices and
graduation,
what you should go for, how to approach it, and how, at least from our experience, you should approach that. So the quote is by Mark Twain. It's quite relevant for the topic we discussed first. So the quote is, 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things you didn't do than by the ones you did do. So throw off the bowlines, sail away from the safe harbor, catch the trade winds in your sails, explore, dream, discover.
Whoa.
How was that? Do you like that?
Whoa. Yeah. Okay. It was good.
Was that a 10 out of 10? Am I hired or?
I'm not quite sure. Like even Steven Schwartzman, he said, if I apply to Blackstone, I might not get hired. So you shouldn't get discouraged by this. You were around 8 out of 10. It's okay.
So you have questions. Okay. I see.
Yeah. So that's the episode for today. And we once again are gonna leave everything below the YouTube description so that you can check all these people that we mentioned, all these books, because as I said in the last episode, in this podcast we try to learn from these people so that we can understand what do we need to do today so that we can become better tomorrow and potentially become successful in the long term, right?
Yeah, exactly. So if you like the video, please leave a like. Leave your feedback below. We do read those. We consider them a lot. We put a lot of time in your feedback, so it does make a difference for us. So do leave a comment if you have one. And thank you for watching.
Yeah, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.